Hello, I'm Maria Hall Brown, and this is LA Currents. Well, designated a historic landmark in 1972, we are actually sitting in the Pico House, which is part of the El Pueblo de Los Angeles Historic Monument, and I am delighted to be joined by the general manager of this magnificent area, Arturo Chávez. So nice to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Maria.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
All right, so we're in one tiny piece of this El Pueblo Historic Monument, so it encompasses what?
Well, the Pueblo Historic Monument encompasses 44 acres. We're actually bounded by Spring Street to the north, Alameda by the south, and then Cesar Chavez on the east, and Arcadia Street on the west. 44 acres that include 8 museums and galleries, historic structures. You're sitting in the Pico House, the first hotel in Los Angeles, built in like 1888, I think. Anyway, so we have the firehouse, which is the first firehouse in Los Angeles. We have the Placita Church, which is across the street. We have the Casa Avila Adobe, which is the first home and the oldest house in Los Angeles, built in 1818. We also have the Sepulveda House. We have the famous Siqueiros mural. So we're bounded by all of these historic structures and locations, and not to mention the plaza itself. Gathering place for people throughout the city and the county.
Okay, I have so many questions, but just because I've never been in the Pico House before, and it's this remarkable structure. We're in this courtyard, it's open air right now, so if we hear helicopters, we know why. But this structure itself, you said it was a hotel, and it's also been in a lot of films.
Yes, we film a lot here at Pueblo, and the Pico House is one of the backdrops for several filming series and movies, right? It's a 3-story hotel, first hotel in Los Angeles. Pio Pico was the first Mexican governor of the state of California. It was a partnership with him and Antonio Cuyo, right? And it was the architect was Ursa Kaiser, who also built the chapel, or I should say the cathedral, Viviana's, down in LA here, in the older cathedral. And it is used by filming right now because it's empty. So we do have, it can be anything. As you know, Hollywood has its magic, and it can be anything. We recently had some films inside this particular location where we had them turn it into an art gallery. It was quite a transformative event. And so we can use that for several things. We also use it for gatherings and events, and some people have used it for fundraisers also. We've hosted like the, let's say the foundation, the foundation work for the Dolores Huerta has come here a couple times, and she's had some foundation work here done so too. So it's quite a spectacular location. It's been preserved, and it still looks beautiful.
It does indeed. Well, so much of what is here is spectacular locations, including, you mentioned the Avila House, which is literally considered the birthplace of Los Angeles, is it not?
Yes, it is. Los Angeles was actually founded on September 4th, 1781. Originally down a little bit further down southeast next to the river on a village, indigenous tribe, the Yagna village of indigenous people from the Mission San Gabriel. About 1815, the river flooded a lot and washed out a lot of the village and the town itself, so it was moved up here in about 1815. So we have used and recognized this as the birthplace of Los Angeles, given the longevity that it's sustained. We've also seen a lot of changes, as you know, and the Casa Adobe Avila, which is one of the oldest house in the city of Los Angeles, 1818, preserved by Christina Sterling back in 1930.
Wow. Okay, but multiple cultures are celebrated in this area. You mentioned 7 museums.
8 museums and galleries, yes.
Okay, so there's lots of different backgrounds, because we're a diverse city, we have a diverse population, and there's a lot of celebration of a bunch of cultures here as well.
Yes, even according to the foundation of the actual city, which was 11 families, 44 pobladores. They were a mixed race. Here in the actual El Pueblo, we have the Chinese American Museum, which has a great exhibit of Chinese culture and history. Chinatown was across the street from us, and some parts of this area were also considered Chinatown. We also have the Italian American Museum, which is at the Italian Hall, and celebrates Italian culture. They have events, Taste of Italy. The Chinese American Museum has events, the Lantern Festival, that's well attended. And so it is quite a diverse background, just like the city of LA.
You mentioned everything's open now, but
Yes.
it's been kind of a rough run. And actually, you started as general manager not much before the lockdown happened. So how is everything now? I know that we're still kind of, every day is a different situation, and every day has a different set of rules and regulations, or lack of thereof. But how are things now, and how did everyone fare during the last 18 months?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, Maria, because I did actually start in February, and we were shut down in March.
Well, you just had such a running start there.
So, yes, we were in somewhat of a panic mode, just like the entire world was, right? With the
Right.
pandemic that occurred, we had to adjust to that new reality, that new world, right? And so, yes, it was difficult for everyone to sit here. All the museums closed down, all the merchants had to close down, and we were stuck with a situation of trying to preserve the location and making sure that we were able to continue operations throughout the pandemic. Things are now open, and I want to tell that to everyone, that we're welcome people to come visit and see us here at Olvera Street and Pueblo, visit the museums and visit the merchants. How did we fare? Well, the city council helped us out. The mayor and the city council helped out a lot of the merchants with a waiver of rent for 15 months. Which really assisted their ability to survive during this place. We're bound, and we are really at the whims of tourism here in the Pueblo. Okay, so tourism being shut down, not only local tourism from the states, but international tourism. So we were prior to the pandemic, right, 1919 and 2019, over 2 million visitors a year. We would have on one week like 9,000 people visit Casa Adobe, Avila, right? Where we're down to like 1,500.
Wow.
So we were able to survive that. Everything's open. The merchants are now back. The restaurants are open. People are here. We started on the 8th of August, Sunday entertainment at the Kiosco, or the actual plaza. For free entertainment for people to come, because it's a very important place for a community, right? In most places, people have a plaza, they have the church, they have the place. It's a gathering spot, and historically, this has been a gathering spot for many people, and not only in LA, but throughout the other surrounding communities, right? So people come here, they gather, they walk around the plaza, they paint, they converse with other people, they have lunch, they walk around. This is a central point of interaction for a lot of people in the city.
And it's also a point of education. I mean, school children come here consistently and constantly, so that was an issue there. Are you looking forward to welcoming back students?
Yes, we're ecstatic that school has started. I'm sure parents are too.
Mm-hmm.
But more importantly, we welcome student tours, right? Student tours, it's so great to come in the morning and see these kids coming off the buses and running around to probably the shock of their teachers, but running around because they do that. We do have a lot of activities for them. They do have, and we coordinate with some of the school tours, and we also provide the tours for the students. Mm-hmm. And they have like scavenger hunts. They're looking around trying to see who's going to fill out the paper first.
Sure.
And they also get a very good education on things that are happening here, visiting the Casa Avila, which is Adobe, which is actually, like I said, one of the oldest houses, but important to see the structure and the history of how people lived before. How things started here, how things were working, and kids really kind of become amazed at those kinds of things, right? And they're able to come back. We do have a woodworking person here that actually is doing a lot of stuff. Redid their cross, and when he's open, Jackie Haddad, who opens up his stuff on the gallery, and then the kids get a chance to see the woodworking itself. So it's really great.
All right, well, you mentioned Olvera Street and the merchants and the fact that they're back, because that is probably something a lot of people think about, especially if they want to come enjoy the city and great food and fun things to buy, etc. But the merchants themselves are an interesting component to all of this, because a lot of them have actually been here for decades, or their family businesses. So there's a lot of history there too, is there not?
Yes, I mean, the merchants were founded in 1930 through Christina Sterling in 1930 on Easter Sunday. These merchants have been, many of these are families that have been around here for over 91 years. The majority of these merchants have been, you know, obviously they're not the actual initial merchants, but their families have been here since 1930. Some of which, for example, started out as shoeshine boys, their families, their grandfathers, and ended up getting business here. And so they still are here present. They have been determined a cultural resource through the city. And what we've looked at is that those families have survived and have had a lot of success with their, you know, children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. And they've grown up here on the street. The kids have grown up here and knowing each other since, you know, they were working with the shops and with their families, right?
So what are some of the variety of merchants in the restaurants that are a good story that you've heard from one of the restaurants, you know, and the families that have been part of this?
You know, the current, the Luz del Dia restaurant, which has been here for many, many years, started out as an actual store.
Really?
Across the street in parking lot 2. They actually were like moved over and started as a store. Then Christina Sterling brought them back in. They opened up this restaurant and they've been there, and it's an historic place. You know, we've gotten the other restaurants, Paseo, which are sit-down restaurants, large restaurants, Luz del Dia, Paseo Inn, and also La Golondrina, have been here since the 30s. They've been here with their families, and they've been able to provide, you know, traditional foods and also entertainment and drinks and for folks visiting Olvera Street. We've also got the smaller restaurants and takeouts. We've got Cilito Lindo on the corner of Cesar Chavez and Alameda, which has lines around the block sometimes regularly because people come in for just their taquitos and guacamole sauce.
Yeah,
right?
me too.
So
green sauce.
So from the smaller, you know, restaurants to the larger restaurants, we've got different types of food. We've got different types of, you know, Mexican artifacts and other artifacts that have come through. Again, mentioning Christina Sterling once more, she had this idea of a Mexican village, and these merchants have been here since 1930 and continue to operate, and we are one of the premier tourist locations for the city.
What prompted her? What was her role in the city, and why did she think that this was something that could happen? Because she obviously has had an incredible influence on the history of Los Angeles.
She saved the Casa of Avila. That's what her influence was. She saw that Olvera Street, which was Vine Street and later renamed Olvera Street for the first county judge, was dilapidated and needed severe attention. And so she was able to save that. And her love for the Mexican culture and the actual location became her whole life to try and save this. And so yes, she is an integral part of Olvera Street and of the Pueblo.
What was her role with the city? Was she a patron of the arts? Was she in city government? What was her role?
Actually, no, she was a patron of arts more or less. She was not in the city government. She was more of a booster to save the city, and she took on this task because she wanted to save and preserve the location of the founding location for the city of Los Angeles.
Well, speaking of saving and preserving, I mean, there's a lot of art and there's lots of murals, but there's one mural in particular that even we were talking about before we started filming, the Siqueiros mural, which was painted in the 30s, covered up for a number of reasons, some of them very political, and now has been I don't want to say restored. It's been saved. It's been
conserved.
Conserved.
Yeah. So we have a major conservation effort, right? We have partnered with the Getty, and the Getty has been just a great partner in terms of conserving the mural. Yes, you're right. David Alfaro Siqueiros painted this mural in 1932. It was quite a shock when it was revealed, and was actually closed down and covered by and whitewashed completely as a result of the images that were there. The Getty, as well as the Pueblo, decided to conserve, not to restore, but conserve the actual mural, which was paint was taken off, the white wall was taken off. He used a very interesting way of painting at that time. He was one of the biggest Mexican muralists, along with Diego Rivera and Orozco, and he was also believed in public art, and that art should be for everyone, right? And so walls should be covered with art, right? And as a result of that, this mural has been conserved. We call it the attic because it's the America Tropical, which is the name of the mural, interpretive center. We have an elevator that takes you up to a platform that you can actually see the mural with, and then on the gallery itself, we have the description of the mural, the different people that were shown in the mural, and that's why it's an interpretive center, so you could see what's going on the actual mural and why it was somewhat controversial, and also why his background and his focus was in terms of developing this particular mural.
Why was it controversial, by the way? And this was his last mural, was it not?
Yes, he did 3 murals in L.A. He did one in Malibu, which is now at Santa Barbara Museum. They took it at a private home, and he did one in Westlake at the Chenard's Art Studio, which is where he was at, and it's off of in MacArthur Park area. There's been some moves to preserve and conserve those also. That's the last one, the one at the Chenard. Why was it controversial? Because it was supposed to depict like a Mexican village. He started out with like a jungle scene, and people thought it was going to be this real tropical scene. But what ended up happening was that he showed the revolutionary soldiers in Mexico. He showed the indigenous tribes being punished by the Spaniards, and then he also, the major theme in the middle of the thing was an indigenous person strapped to a double cross with an American eagle overhead. Invoking the imperialism of the United States, which was a focus of his, because what happened was in 1932, we're talking about the Depression, and we're talking about what was being done in Los Angeles. And him being a Mexican from, that was taken out of Mexico City actually, because he participated in the May Day Parade, he came here, and then he saw what was happening here with people being deported during this time. There was 1 million Mexicans deported, many of them were U.S. citizens. And so as a result of that, the impact, many of them happened to be rounded up here in the plaza. And so as a result, I think that impact, I know people have different interpretations, had while he's painting a mural, ends up impacting and displaying his opinion on what was going on.
You could spend multiple days here because it's not just a one-stop, and even you were saying that there are a number of organizations that are now housed here and do good works here, and there's a lot of changing of exhibits in specific spaces. What are some of the secrets that people may not think of right off the top of their mind when they're thinking about coming up? Obviously, they're going to go to Olvera Street. They might go, to the Interpretive Center. They might go to the Adobe. But what are some of the don't miss, even though you may not realize it's their places?
Well, if you get a chance to see Jack Quijada doing his work on wood trimming, I mean, it's very impressive. He uses hand tools, not any other tools, and so it's an art form that has not been done in quite some time. So I think that that's a possibility in the gallery, right? There is, obviously, we've mentioned the other museums, like the Chinese American Museum, that people don't go to, and also the Firehouse that people are not aware of when they think of Olvera Street, right? The Firehouse and the Chinese American Museum. But those museums are very important to show, as the Firehouse was one of the first firehouses here. You also have a lot of other small hidden places here in Olvera Street, which along with our partners across the street, the Plaza Cultura, which is run by the county, they also have a museum there, and they have a lot of interpretive centers there too. People can go to that place for our partners. We also have the Methodist Church here that has a Museum of Social Justice in the basement. We also program in the Gallery of the Biscolu Center, so sometimes there's some programming there. So there are other places that are, obviously they're in the basement of the Biscolu and the basement of the Methodist Church, so if you don't pay attention, you can't go down there, but there are other places that can be viewed, and tours that can be taken and given to you.
Well, all right. If in fact things stay stable, all right, now you get to do everything you were hoping to do before you ended up living in a virtual world and in a lockdown city. So when you sat in your chair for the first time and didn't know that a month later it was all going to change, what did you hope that you were going to be able to do? And now, have you altered what you have hoped to do, knowing what you know with 18 months of thought? Or do you have certain plans that you want to pursue? What's on the future docket for the area?
Well, immediately what we want to do is reinstitute some of the cultural events that happen here on a regular basis, right?
Okay.
So we have what they call the Day of the Dead or the Dia de los Muertos events here in October 20th to November 2nd. And that's preceded by an art walk, generally speaking. And then we also have like Las Posadas, which is a 9-day celebration with music and dancers and everything else. We continue that, with as we go through October and going through, right? These are the cultural events that happen on a regular and consistent basis that bring thousands and thousands of people here to experience these types of events. And so we want to reinstitute those cultural events that are in partnership with the Olvera Street Merchants Association Foundation. They do this work along with their Pueblo. And like I said, the Day of the Dead, which is really huge. We also have the Las Posadas, which 9 days. We also go through and do the Candelaria, which is another event that happens, and then we move forward a huge event, the Blessing of the Animals, right, which is here with partnership with the church across the street, really well attended and huge. And for me personally, what we like to do is reestablish this place as a premier tourist location and historical location for not only just the tourism, but also for kids that we talked about and college students, right? The impact that this has had on several folks throughout the country and in the city has been all of this history here. It is important that people understand what the history is of the city of Los Angeles and where we come from and how we've developed as a city and as a nation. And I think it all begins here. And so I think that people need to come in and appreciate the cultural events, appreciate the structures, appreciate the buildings for what they are, and the artwork that is everywhere here. And I think that once we do that and establish that, we should be one of the premier locations that people come from all over the world to see how Los Angeles, this huge city, started out in such a small location and spread out to be one of the largest cities and one of the biggest influencers around the country.
Yes, definitely. And this is sort of an esoteric question, but you listed all of the things that are here and the importance of them and the historic relevance. But how does that information, and if you don't have an answer for this, you don't have to, but how does that information and that knowledge and that awareness actually change a life? How did it change your life? Have you seen it change people's lives who have been visitors here? I mean, how does it really alter someone's existence to understand where we came from and the importance of everybody here?
Well, there's a lot of reasons that it changes people's and impacts life. It depends. Everybody's experience is different, obviously. But, for example, the 44 pobladores that started here, right, when there's a plaque here at the plaza, when people see the names and who they were, that creates a whole different reality for people who founded this place. Although Spain, King Carlos III was the one that initiated Governor Felipe Neves to come and found this location. The people that actually founded it were indigenous people, there were blacks, there were different individuals that came here. And so you're looking at a group of people that, you thought like, oh, I thought it was just a bunch of Spaniards that came and did this, which is fine. But you see now that it's quite a mix of folks that came to found the city of Los Angeles, similar to what the city is now. That's one impression that people have. For artists, the Siqueiros mural created quite a mural revolution, I should say, throughout the city and the county of Los Angeles. For a lot of the Chicano artists that saw that during the 80s, there was a burst of artists that wanted to do free art and other types of expression. And so that still is quite powerful for people who are within the arts. The music, the food, the things that happen here all have an impact on that. The buildings itself, the establishment of the buildings, and the actual history that people are somewhat, unless you're a history major or anything else, don't know. But there's a lot of things that have happened here at the plaza and at these buildings that have impacted the city as a whole. Personally, I was here in the 80s as a college student for very different activities that were happening at the plaza. This was designated originally as a free speech area.
Yeah, you were a Chicano Studies and History major.
Right. We did, I actually headed a statewide anti-Baki rally during that time period here and spoke at the Placita as a student. Wow. It impacted me very much then, and it still does, right, because that happened. We now have the free speech movement, free speech place at Cerro Park, and to this day, to this day, we have news crews that park here and do person on the street interviews on a regular basis for things that are happening not only in the city and the county, but in the country and the world. Like, how does that impact you? You'll see camera crews here regularly just kind of interviewing people to say, like, you know, hey, this just happened, what do you think? So this has been the central point for the city for quite some time. And the impact has been quite immense in terms of how people see this and interpret this location and how it sits with folks. So I think that this location is important for people to continue to visit and tour and have a basic understanding of how the city came to be.
I hadn't actually thought about it. It's not just what's here, it's the fact that it's a gathering place of different people from all over the world to be able to experience Los Angeles and each other, and as you said, if there's a news crew around, voice their opinion, or if somebody's speaking in this free speech area, you know, listen to different ideas and that sort of thing. It's an interesting idea to think of this as not just a place, but a human gathering point.
It's similar to many places that are all through Mexico and you know, South America and stuff, where the structure is basically the plaza, right? Obviously it was the Catholic Church that founded all these places, so there was a church, the plaza, and then there was governmental buildings or official buildings around it. That was the system, right? And then they would start doing land grants around the sides of the building, so it would spread out, right? Obviously the spread of the city of Los Angeles is quite vast,
right?
After this, and this was moved over and people moved on, but you know, we still have a central part of the city. People still gather. Everybody knows where the Placita is. Everybody knows where Olvera Street is. And everybody will gather here on a regular and consistent basis to catch up with friends. The other activities that we've mentioned before are people just sitting around the kiosco, right? Doing some artwork, enjoying their meals, talking to other people, playing a game of something, whatever, chess or checkers sometimes. And we want to see that come back after this crazy time that we've experienced with the pandemic.
And on a very practical note, it's actually very easy to get here because you're across the street from Union Station.
Yes, it's very easy to get here through, Union Station is a hub, obviously, and with the connections that we have now with, you know, all the different lines that are coming through from the gold line to, you know, now the numbers that the colors that we have on the public transportation. It is a place that you can come to, get off the train, come and visit, and get back on and go somewhere else.
Okay. Well, you have a lot of plans for the future in terms of presentations, music, events, all those things that you mentioned. But if people want to get current on what's happening here and making sure that when they get here, they know what they can look forward to, what's the easiest way for someone to get information?
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at El Pueblo LA, and also El Pueblo at elpueblo.lacity.org. Those locations and that social media, as we're all now accustomed to, is where you can get the most information about happenings here at El Pueblo.
And that's a wrap on this LA Currents.